Okay, we're holding Siman Kuf Aleph Din Chaticha Real Iskavet. But before we begin, just cover some points that we left off from towards the end of Siman Kuf about the Birya. And then I'll give you a little bit of a surprise about something that is related. It's related to what we're talking about.
You brought into Birya?
Yeah, similar, yeah, very much. Okay, towards the end of Siman Kuf, we dealt with an issue of suffix. Suffix, in other words, is there a bug or there's no bug? That's what we talked about. And it had to do with what the Mechaber says, Derish Morok Shenofal Shambirya Venevda Asura Kol. That if you had a birya, it was gone, you can't find it, then of course everything is asur because a birya is not bottle, afilu be'elef. So we said, well, what happens if you do not know if we gave an example of svek sveika in Hilchos Teloim, that if you're not sure if you had a bug fall in or not, so you have a svek sveika over there that the Shach talks about, and that is whether it fell in or not, is there a bug or not, and if there is, maybe it's cut up. Because as much as we know that the birya is not batal afil be'elef, there's some things that will eliminate the din of birya. And one is if you remove a leg, if it doesn't have the tzura, the original shape, form of the birya. So that was the scenario of svek sveika, which would be a good svek sveika, it would be mutar, because you have a double suffix. And here, you have a situation like this. In the Kdero Morok, Shenofa Shambirya, okay, you can't see it. There's no way to filter it. It's there, you know for a fact. But why don't we have at least one suffix? Just say, well, you know what? Maybe that birya that did fall in, by now, it's not in its original shape. And if not, then it's bottle like everything else. And she should. Okay, that was the question we had. Why don't we say, I may not have explained it clearly, but that was the question that was raised, and the Pri Megadim speaks about it in Hilchos Toiloim, that is, not over here. I thought it was a Pri Megadim over here, but it's the Pri Megadim over there, in Pei Dalad. That's where he brings this Nekuda. That, why don't you just say one suffix, and if you have that one suffix, at least, we're talking about a Derabanan here anyway. So he said that's not a suffix a shokul. It's not a real good suffix. When we talk about sfekis, we'll talk about what a suffix a shokul really means, that it has to be a real strong suffix that is relevant to the case. And since that's not so much a real suffix, as he calls it a suffix a shokul, then we cannot apply it over here. Otherwise, it would be a good suffix. Maybe there is a chance, but there's not such a real chance. It's not a real suffix.
So you're talking about whether it's still to the pot?
No, it was a birya that fell in. So you don't have that suffix. It did fall in.
Right. So I understand your question. Whether that now afterwards is missing a little.
No, why don't you apply that suffix? Because we understand that if it's destroyed, it's no longer din birya. So why don't you say maybe it is destroyed?
The question is at the time. Is it when it fell birya or when you?
No, in the food.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I think what he's asking is the birya was whole at the time it fell in.
Right.
Subsequently to the
Right.
it becomes damaged.
Right. That's what you were saying. Yes.
Right.
But it depends on when you.
I go by what is now
in front of you.
in front of me to me.
The one we
Is it bottle or not? Depending on what I have. If I have a real birya, no. If I don't have a real birya, yes.
But won't most things be damn cooking process?
Sometimes yes, sometimes not. Not necessarily. A hot bug may still look like a bug.
We still have all its.
Yeah, I've tried it. No, I did. I've experimented a little bit. I've taken spiders. What do we do with a spider when you find it? You either throw it down the toilet, or I've had situations where I was using the hot water in the sink, and to experiment what would happen. I put it in the sink or poured hot water over it, and it somehow shriveled a little bit, but nothing happened to the legs or nothing happened to the tzura of the bug. And let me tell you a quick story. There was a rabbi I met once who told me that when he was in Colombia, he was once, and this is a rabbi who was very strict about bugs, and they served him soup and with broccoli, and they didn't serve him the broccoli heads, the flowers as they're called. They just, or at least maybe they did, but he had a big piece of the actual broccoli stem. And just to check it out, or I don't remember if it was just to check it out or just to cut it because it was big. He cut the broccoli stem in half and he found a live worm crawling inside after it was cooked.
So that goes to you.
You know that they find scorpions in places where there was a nuclear blast? They have found scorpions.
That are alive?
They are alive there in the area. That are apparently, obviously they were not blasted. It was not in ground zero per se, but in the general area, they were not affected. They may be eventually, who knows, but some are immune to certain things. Just an interesting point. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, right.
Cockroaches are everything.
Now, the last seif is important, which, before I get to the last seif, maybe let's cover one more point. The Aruch HaShulchan brings down like this. How could we explain that people are a little bit lenient with certain types of bugs, that there's certain things that infest our foods, and people do not always check it thoroughly. He tries to be melamed chus. Then, if we're talking about things that are not batel afilu be'elef, then how do you explain it that people do not, today there's more of an awareness, of course, but in general, there's certain things that people are not so makbid. And he tries to be melamed chus. You know what it means to be melamed chus? To find merit in what they're doing. And he says, but he points out two things. We always can rely on the shita of Rabbeinu Shimshon, the shita that others also hold to, and that is that birya is not batul b'shishim, but it is batul by 960. It was just by 1,000. There is that shita that several hold. Yeah. Or close to 1,000.
16.
Right. In other words, close to 1,000. That, yes. And usually you may have that kind of an amount against the birya, against the little insect. So that's one thing, he says. In the end, it's batel anyway. Number two, he says there are many of these little things that are creeping or crawling creatures that if they ever get in, they're pogum or mo'us, as he says, me'atzmam. And as I pointed out on Tuesday, there's two kinds of little insects when it comes to pogum. Those that are pogum me'atzmam, they themselves, their taste is no good. And those that, as a result of combining it with some other food, they make that food pogum. Something that is pogum me'atzmam is, of course, less of an issue. Right? It's pogum, yeah, but it's pogum, right? It will be less of an issue and it would be batel. Okay, so he says here you have two reasons why we could be melamed chus, he says. You can find merit, and in the end, even though it's serious matter, in the end, you're covered somehow. You may be covered with these two. And I want to add to that, or it could be others say it too, that it could be that many, many times, whether it's in frozen vegetables or things that we buy that are cooked already, by then, the thing is completely shattered. Maybe. Remember that primegodem, that you can't always use that suffix by itself to say maybe it's shattered. But together with this and together with that, maybe we have various sfeikas here that possibly we can be melamed chus on those people who have not checked thoroughly and they should have checked thoroughly. But that's what's going to lead us to the next thing that I told you that I have a little bit of a surprise for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have to worry about the blueberries or raspberries that are
That's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to be talking about all of that. Before I do want to get into this next Siman, the first two seifim, but we'll have enough time. Yeah.
I didn't understand. Did you say they're not whole? Why is that?
I'll talk about that. That's part of my surprise. Yeah.
What the different one? So what's it? It has a bad taste, or
Eventually, we'll be learning about things that have a bad taste, right?
But you said that was a way to be made. What was
to be melamed chus, to find merit.
Why? What is it?
In other words, after all, do you need to check or don't you need to?
But what's having a bad taste?
Then it's not even though it's a birya, right? Because of the bad taste, things that are most.
Oh, it's pogum, so it's not even
right,
birya anymore.
right. Things that are most is not a problem.
You're saying it's not even birya because it has a bad taste.
Exactly. Things that are most.
People
disgusting?
coming up in the rest of the year seem to
Yeah.
be very much.
Right. That's what I'm going to be talking about.
No.
Yeah. Go ahead. Right.
If they are so fussy then, how do we be malam?
Yeah, well, certain things are very visible, quite visible, and certain things are not. What the Aruch HaShulchan was talking about is certain bugs that are difficult to see. They're not so visible. You really have to. You don't need a microscope for that, but you do have to really check very close. And they didn't do that in the past so much with certain types of infestation, unless they were aware that this thing had some bugs with wings. Then they would check it. But there's all kinds. I think they call them aphids and trips and mites and worms, all kinds of bugs. Different name depending on the vegetable.
Right. So there's more medactic on that?
No, I'm going to talk about that. I'll tell you why when we get into the next subject. Right. So the next seif, the last seif was that Yerakos mevushalos shenimtzu bohem sholosh taloim Yerakos, and here's the key word. The last seif says you found 3 worms in the vegetable. That's surim. The whole thing is asur. What do you mean 3? Find 1 is asur. Yerakos mevushalos shenimtzu bohem sholosh taloim Yerakos asurim. Yerakos asurim. The rest, me'ashlakos, the liquid, you can be misanen on if possible. You can filter it mutorim. Meat you can wash off to make sure there's nothing on it. But what is it? What's the chiddush over here? Did you think about it here? What is he saying here? That if there's 3, it's asur. If there's 1, it's asur.
For 1, you might be able to get away with a suffix or a sfeik.
No, there's no sfeikis here.
No sfeik.
Yeah. Okay. So the quick answer is here we're talking about after the fact. Okay, we're talking about Yerokas already mavushalos. The dish has already been cooked. Now you see it in front of you. Okay, in other words, it didn't fall in at the time that it was being cooked, and now you have a dilemma what to do. Now the scenario here is they're serving it on the table, and you find some bugs in it, and you can see, and you can remove it. Okay. I don't care, he says, if you can remove it. If you found 3, you still have to throw it in the garbage.
That's what's on your plate or on every plate?
What's on the whole food?
Whatever's hot.
Yeah. That's the chiddush here, okay? That's what you have to remember. This seif, he's talking about throwing away this food, even if you remove the bugs. Because if you find 3, there's maybe more. Unless you have a way to really check the food where you can remove all of them. It may be. If you have foods that you can easily detect it, like potatoes and meat, like he says, but the meat you can wash off. But what if it's all kinds of stew and vegetables? And so if you found 3, there's a chazaka here. It's infested. Unless you can really check it very well, you have to throw it away. That's why it says asurim. Asurim, I know. It's not bottle. No, even if you remove the 3 bugs. Okay, you may not have caught that, but even if you remove the bugs, the whole thing is still asur, because there may be more. Okay, and this you'll understand a little bit better when I give you this little surprise shear in between.
What happens to
Yeah.
the serving people was cooked in?
No, that we already covered. The blias is not a problem. No, the blias is not a problem.
Okay. I didn't know whether because of the chazaka now or
Right, we spoke about it. The Rashba speaks about it, about the blias not being an issue at all. Why? First of all, there's no din on the tam and the blia. There's no din of birya. So hopefully, I mean, tam, as far as the liquid is anyway, bottled the shish. Yeah.
It was a question. It doesn't do with taste necessarily, right? Beer is
Right.
the Torah, you can't eat it.
Right.
That's from the bottom of the bottom, right?
That's correct.
So let's say with the gravy, the Mechaber talks about the gravy. So the basic law is what? In terms of other things, the birria gives taste that you have to bottle in 6. You have to bottle the gravy in 6, whatever it is.
That's right.
If it doesn't give taste, then you don't worry about it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's the
Not
bottom
worry
line.
about the taste.
About the taste, about the liquid, about the rest of the stuff.
Look,
But the
yeah,
solids.
If it doesn't give taste, you don't worry about the other
Right.
stuff, pancake or
That's correct.
Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the one end of the Mechaber, he says it dissolves, and therefore the certain 60 is needed. I don't know what that means, but that's because the gid doesn't give taste.
Yeah, in dealing with the gid, we spoke about how there's no time in begid and benois and time we hold that there's no flavor given off. The only issue ever, either with the gid itself that is not bottled, the birya, gid anosh is considered a birya. From the very beginning, it's always been asur. Plus, you have if you have the shuman on the yerach, on the leg, being cooked together, we are machmer on that shuman that belongs to the gid.
They say if the
Shuman
gid
is not
dissolves-
chalev, but the shuman of the gid we're machmer on.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's
Huh?
there's shoes.
That's only the shuman was the issue there.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we had a question about Melicha there. You know, it was already salted. So the salting is not a real big deal there, because eventually when we talk a little bit about Melicha in Taaruvot, we will see that there is Melicha of something which is fatty. There's a fatty meat and there's a lean meat. With the fatty meat, it's more of an issue than with the meat. Here it's very lean. If anything, you have a kedei netila, you have or klipa, whatever, you have a very small amount that has become usher as a result of the Melicha. So we're not strict about the problem of being ushered from the time it was maluach already. And the same thing, we're not machmir with Hanan here, with Gid Anoshe, with Shuman. The whole thing is the Rabbanan. Yeah. Okay, now comes the little surprise. We are talking about birya, so I figured this is a good time to discuss bugs. Hilchos Taloim, even though it's a separate Siman. If you ever have a chance, it's not such a long Siman Pei Daled. Very interesting. Goes through the whole issue of Taloim. Taloim is a very popular topic today, somewhat popular. It's come to the attention of various organizations, kashrus organizations. There's no doubt that it's a bigger of a problem in areas that are humid. Unfortunately, Eretz Yisrael being that it's a humid area, some places, has a lot of problems with it. We have less of a problem on the West Coast than East Coast, but it's still a problem sometimes with certain fruits and vegetables. And I want to discuss with you a little bit this topic so you can have some sort of an idea of what's really going on and what's so serious about little bugs, whether they're chocolate covered or not. Well, what's the big deal about it? Okay, the Torah talks about 3 types of sherets, crawling creatures. There's sherets hamayim, in the ocean, all kinds of creatures in all kinds of sizes. They're called sherets hamayim. There's sherets ha'oretz, crawling creatures on the ground. Anything that's connected to the ground, whether it grows in a tree and fruits. And there's sherets ha'of. Ha'of? A bird? Yeah. It just means flying creature. Like bugs and flies that fly. That's the difference. Now, because the Torah repeats the lavin several times in different words, and there's no chidush in the repetition. Whenever the Torah repeats a pasuk, repeats a lav, repeats something, we would expect new additional information. Like sometimes there is an additional detail. If there is no additional detail, that means there's an extra lav on the exact same thing. So when it comes to sherets hamayim, if you eat it, there's 4 lavim. When it comes to sherets ha'oretz, there is 5 lavim. And when it comes to sherets ha'of, there's 6 lavim. So depending on the bug, if it's a sherets ha'of, for example, a person eating it intentionally can be transgressing 6 lavim, as opposed to eating a piece of pork, there's only 1 lav. So eating a bug is 6 lavim compared to 1, which people sometimes do not realize. Eating a bug, therefore, is more chomer, more serious, more lavim than eating pork. Now, they both contaminate your nefesh. It says, when it mason bone, when it tamtam bone, they're both no good. The question, of course, is how much do you have to have of it to contaminate you? We don't know. We know that they're usher. That's what we know. Now, besides the chumrah of the lavin, what makes them different or apart from everything else is the shear, which we spoke about earlier, that it could be a very, very small bug. And the isur is a isur of birya min Torah. In other words, that when the Torah answers these things, it did not differentiate between the sizes of them. So that's an additional detail to consider when you're thinking about how serious these things are. Usually, the isur of achila of nevelas and treifos is kazais. All right, that's the basic shear for eating. There are some exceptions about the shear of eating some, and this is one. That even if you were to eat a small little bug, there's no kazayis there, there's barely anything. It doesn't even weigh anything. A little bug. There's malchus, lashes. Anyway, 6 times lashes, wow. Okay. But anyway, that's what makes a difference. The next chidush is with bugs, that even if the bug is dead, you can't have it. It doesn't say anywhere that I can have a dead bug. Whether it's alive or whether it's dead, it's a bug. So therefore, even if it's frozen in sub-zero temperatures in the frozen vegetables, if it has bugs, if it can have bugs, it's a problem, even if it's frozen. The only thing that if it's frozen, it may be more difficult for you to detect. But that does not mean that it's any better just because it's frozen or dead. It's exact same issue.
It is dry.
Okay, very good point. Thank you for raising that. After 12 months, the Mechaber brings it down. It's a fact. Any insect or any creature that has no backbone becomes like dust. So if you were to keep certain things like this in your storage pantry for 12 months, you can have it. Okay, Ilan?
Yeah,
You want to have those almonds and pistachios?
Even if it was cooked into something?
No.
So it would have to be a standalone.
Very good point. If what happens with flour, why does flour need nipui means sifting is called in English? It's the sift, even whatever. Yeah. Why does kemach, flour, need nipui? It's a kemach. And where did the flour come from? The flour came from wheat, let's say. Wheat that may have had infestation. But what did you do with the wheat? You ground it. What did you do to the bugs when you ground the bugs too? Well, wait a minute, that's mevatel iser lechatchila. No, that's not mevatel iser lechatchila. You're right. I want the flour. I don't want the ground bugs. So because my kavanah is not to ground the bugs, and not be mevatel iser lechatchila, when I grind without checking, should I check or not? We're going to soon see what needs checking or not. But I don't check. I grind everything. I want flour. So why do you have to sift the flour? Sometimes at least you sift the flour is because there may be eggs. And from the eggs you can have new creatures coming out. So there may not be eggs in that which is frozen. Right?
They're not going to be able to. In the
Exactly.
freezing process, wouldn't the bug, because of that you...
I don't think so. I think you freeze it. Haven't you seen that picture of a frozen mammoth, baby frozen mammoth intact in the tundra in the Siberia there, frozen? That's why they were able to see it intact. There have been human beings that they found over several hundred years and even a couple thousand years because of where they laid. They were frozen over time. The body did not decompose. When it comes to the decomposition of the corpse, a lot depends on the ground, the soil, of course, the amount of exposure, the temperature. These are the factors that will determine how fast the corpse will decompose in the ground or above ground. Above ground, the corpse will always decompose faster than underground or in the water because of bugs coming to attack it. But depending on the temperature and the type of soil, that will determine how fast the corpse will die. The experts who find a corpse, a dead person, how do they tell? He died 3 days ago. Because they see the simanim of 2-3 days in the skin. Usually, you can see it. The discoloration, skin coming off, all kinds of little things on the skin. That's early decomposition. Yeah. Yes.
I was in Iran. And Navi.
Okay, that's okay. Let me tell you about Habakkuk Hanavi, and you correct me because I know the story almost firsthand. There was the governor of a little city not too far from Hamadan had a dream. Why are you desecrating my grave? Why are you taking care of? This guy he had a dream. The governor, or the mayor. So he asked people, whose grave is that? And they told him it's Habakkuk Hanavi. They went and dug it up, and it was videotaped on Iranian TV. And it wasn't 8 years ago. This story when it happened, I think it happened about 15 years ago. Okay, so you'll fill in after I finish. You'll fill me in after. So this was videotaped. They opened the grave of Habakkuk. Supposedly it's Habakkuk. He was found intact. The hair was black, just like he died now. Couldn't tell any difference whatsoever. Everything fresh. Of course, the governor fixed it up. They were all in shock. What else did you find out?
I think Israel trying to smuggle it to Israel.
I don't. That was a rumor that they made up. Yeah.
This was 8 years ago.
Persian rumors. Yeah.
Yeah.
8 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you heard when you were there.
Right.
But you were in Tehran.
I wasn't. The Muslims they in there.
Of course, they pray everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Took several pictures of it. That was,
You do? You really?
yeah.
You remember the name of the city? It's a funny name. It's a hard name. I forget the name. It was a hard name to remember. No. Shush is not too far from Mordechai and Esther.
Near Ahvaz there.
No. Ahvaz is further south.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. When I studied geography. Yeah. Ahvaz is towards the south.
Right, that's true. That's
This is all. This is further
that's
north.
the Daniel. The Daniel at the
Yes,
Ahvaz.
they say it's further down, right?
Yeah, actually, I give you a story about the Ahvaz. I was talking about the Muslims.
Yeah.
These is Muslims.
Okay.
The guy said that the war with Iraq,
Yeah.
the Iraqis were bombarding us and we did not know what to do.
Right.
We pulled it out of him. I mean, him out of
They pulled what?
the Daniel Hanna, his grave out was placed.
Who pulled it?
The Muslim.
Which
And
Muslims? Iraqi or Iranian?
Iranian. He said the moment he did that,
But what do you mean they pulled him?
I don't know, he said there's a place that they covered, is covered.
Oh, they opened maybe to pray or to.
Right,
Yeah.
and then he was saying it's,
They attributed the miracle to that.
right.
Yeah, that I would agree. Yeah.
It's amazing that
There have been stories. The Vilna Gaon was moved over from the original spot where he was buried in the early 60s to another spot because the Russian government at that time wanted to make, I think, a highway or something. So some people came in and dug him up, and he was found exactly intact the way he passed away. Even the tachrichim, the shrouds were intact, the beard, everything perfect. The three people who transferred him over all passed away that same year. Yeah, it's not a simple matter to transfer the dead, especially someone like the Vilna Gaon. But this happened. He passed away in 1799, so we're talking about 160-something years, 165 years after his passing. Rabbi Elyahu, so they say, during World War II, the Nazis wanted to open up his grave, and they found him intact. Yeah, that's
give you another story.
right.
It was actually of a rabbi, and then the municipality come to do a project, and they want it from.
Okay,
And the Jews come,
because it's a holy place.
right.
Right.
And then the workers come in, and they start digging the
Digging,
place.
yeah.
The moment they do,
Bites them.
bites them.
Right.
And then from that moment, they called that Rabbi Mari, snake.
The snake, yeah.
And
Yeah.
the place is intact. They made a shul out of the place.
Sure.
And
In the Har HaZetim, the Mount of Olives, when the Jordanians were in control, unfortunately they destroyed many matzevas. They went with a tractor to make a path there, and as the tractor approached the cave of the Or HaChaim, it turned over. They did it again, turned over again. 2 or 3 times, the guy got killed, I think, the tractor. Turned over. So when you go to visit there, you can see that the whole section leading to that caver is all flattened. His caver is intact. Yeah. Big tzaddikim, tremendous zechut. But anyway, from bugs, we went to
let's talk
graves.
about the yashon, with the hair, the flower. And the
No, but no, that's a separate issue. Yashan Chadosh is a separate problem. It has nothing to do with bugs.
No, it's in the flower.
Are you talking about the bugs only?
Right.
Okay, you're not talking about Yashan Chadosh and the flower.
no.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much one of the last things in Hilchos Teloim, that something that is very old is not a problem because it has become completely like dust. And the dust is not a problem. It has turned completely to dust.
Provided it was understood you correctly. You said.
Exactly. So that's where we went from frozen. Yeah, as long as it's not, as long as it's dust, and you can assume it's dust under certain under certain conditions. So that's why it's not a problem with old foods. Should you check it anyway? Of course, you don't want to have something that's infested. I don't think you do, unless you don't recognize what it is. But if you know it's old, if it's a year, it's not a problem.
Well, frozen and canned,
Right, exactly. They can. That would not be the case then. Frozen, it would still be intact.
of a dry state.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you have certain food items that can last for a long time, like figs and dates. Yeah. All right. So we're talking about the bugs, and we said that in the case of the wheat, that of course that was ground up. So you have the bugs that have been ground up too. So in that case, of course, the whole idea of birya is gone, and it's not a bittul isur lechatchila, as we said. Okay, what happens, however, with bugs on fruits? With fruits, it's a little bit more tricky, because with fruits, you have two kinds. You have those that are still connected to that are more problematic, and those that are already tolush, that are disconnected from the tree. Those that are connected to the tree, bugs, the question is about bugs that may have formed in the... Since it's connected to the tree, so it's connected to the ground, it's considered sheretz ha'aretz. So Mechaber adds a little detail, but it has to have moved a little bit. It has to have rochish. it has to have crawled, not that it's in one spot the whole time. It has to have crawled a little bit in order for it to be considered sheretz haaretz. So those would always be a problem. Bugs, however, that may have come from elsewhere, if it's a tolush fruit, that all depends on that all depends if it moved or not. If it did not move, it came back, or if it did not come back. That is a little bit different. So there's different conditions for fruits that are disconnected, in other words, that have been picked, versus fruits that are still connected. Now, what are we supposed to do? Regardless, I mean, we don't always know where the bug came from. All we know is a bug, and we have to be machmir. We have to be strict about it. However, what we do need to know is this a bug that needs to be checked or not? That's what we need to do. Because we always have a din of roiv. There is such a thing as roiv. I mean, if the roiv of something doesn't have a problem, we don't have to check it. I'll give you an example. If you ever learn Hilchos Treifas, you will learn about the lungs. If you go to a Schlachthaus, as they're called, how's it called in English? Slaughterhouse, yeah. You will see the boydek putting in his hands into the lungs to check for sirches, for, what are the sirches called in English? Adhesions, yeah, thank you. And he will check maybe the hemses, he will check certain stomachs sometimes, because sometimes they eat all kinds of stuff, nails get in there and make holes. He may check the overall look, of course, but he will not check the head. The head? Maybe there's a hole in the brain, which would make it tareif. Why doesn't he check the head? What's the answer? Because most of the time there's no problem in the head. So you see from that, as an example, that you can use roiv. You don't have to check if there's no reason to check. It's very rare. Unless, of course, you came to your attention. You notice somehow you came to your attention. But if not, you don't have to check that which you don't suspect. Okay?
There's been a problem in the last mission of fish.
I'm going to get to that. That's soon. Okay? So you don't have to check it. Okay? The head. So when it comes to bugs, there's three kinds of bugs. Of fruits, there's three kinds of fruits, really. Besides the connected fruit, the ones that are on the tree or not. Fruit that are known to have problems, to have bugs, at least in this area, in the area where you're talking about. When I say fruits, I also mean vegetables, leafy vegetables, that are known to have bugs. When something is known to have bugs, you have no choice, you have to check it. And when it comes to checking, we did say that you have to be visible to the naked eye. But you may need to look in the sunlight. Some of them are camouflaged, like in romaine lettuce. Some may even be green. And romaine lettuce happens to have bugs. Depending on the vegetable, there's different kinds of bugs. And if you do a good check, you'll find it. How do you clean it? We'll talk about that next. But it's a problem. So anything that is known to have a problem, you have to check. If you didn't check, it's a problem. You can't eat it. It's known to have a problem. How could you eat it? I didn't see it. Didn't see it because you didn't check. If you would check, you would find. So anything that is known to have a problem, we have to check. Anything that is known not to have a problem ordinarily, you don't have to check. You check apples only if you found a half of worm.
Because then you're looking for the other.
Yeah. You may have. So otherwise, we don't check apples. Any fruits, anything that we know does not usually have a problem, doesn't have to be checked. Then there's an in-between. The in-between category of miut amotsui, it's called in Halacha. Miut amotsui means it's a miut. And miut we call 1/10, according to some poskim.
It's a minority.
Minority, but it's a motsui. Miut amotsui. It is found occasionally, as we say in English. Okay? So miut
is a common case.
Common. Oh, yeah, but it's occasionally, I like to say occasionally you find it. Occasionally? Well, how much? 1/10 of the times. If that's the case, you should check. But in case you didn't, it's all cooked up, it's okay, because we follow the roiv. Okay? That's the quick halacha about miut hamotzoi. There's different questions about what miut hamotzoi is, how much is miut hamotzoi, and so forth, but that's basically the rule. The common denominator of these things is that things that have problems should be checked. Some things are more difficult to check. Some things are very delicate, like raspberries. If you're going to throw it down, like you're supposed to do to shake it up. So there's a din as follows. There is a din that is sometimes used called chazaka. And you use that especially as we saw in the mechaber after something is cooked. The mechaber's case of chazaka was you've already cooked it, you had 3, it's asr. We hold 3 as opposed to 2. That if you find 3 or more in a particular pint of raspberries, just either throw it away or you better do a thorough checking. When you find 3, you got to either do a thorough checking or just throw it away because it probably has even more. And that halacha of chazaka does not only apply to a pint, it applies to a bag too, depending on what you're talking about. Either you're talking about the pint, or you're talking about the box.
The packaging.
On the packaging, exactly. So that's called chazaka. Chazaka means there's a tendency here to have bugs, that's the mechaber says. In mechaber's case, it was cooked, you throw it away, unless there's a way to filter it out and to really do check. And here too, some vegetables are very difficult to check, and you could use chazaka. You could use chazaka if you know how to check. Artichokes, I mean, there's some things that you really get inside, I mean, you got to really take the whole thing apart. And they happen to have problems. What do you call those long stem, I always forget it, asparagus, on the top. There may be issues. What tends to be, of course, a problem is the romaine lettuce. We said romaine lettuce definitely has issues. In Israel, a lot of the vegetables have problems, including something even like corn. Corn. May have strawberries. They recently found in some areas by the leaves. They're very small and they're white. So there are ways to check these things. Now, as far as cleaning them, one of the ways that they recommend, of course, is depending on what you're doing, is to shake it very well, to put it in the water, but with a little bit of soap or some other acid, because water by itself sometimes does not do the job, even if you rinse it, because some of these little creatures, the way they hold on to the leaf, through something that comes out of their body, a little bit of a secretion that acts like a glue that holds them to the thing. They don't want to fall off. So just water may not sometimes. That's why sometimes water doesn't do it. That's why you have to put salt. When, for example, with romaine lettuce, what I do is I first insert it into a big bowl with water and salt, a lot of salt. And for the most part, after a few minutes, I see them all floating.
Now, how much is a lot of salt?
It depends how many, let's say you have a bowl with about 10 to 15 leaves, right? So, I'm talking about from the big can. I shake it, what is it, 3, 4. No, not that much, not that much. It's salty. The water would be salty. Oh, no. I would say more like 2 tablespoons heaped. Something like that, if you want to measure, yeah. Approximately, maybe 2. Anyway, most of the time I see the bugs already floating by then.
And it's cold water?
Cold water. Yeah, you don't want your hot water because you ruin the romaine lettuce. Yeah. Then after that, I rinse every lettuce under running water. I rinse it with a spritz, And then after I'm done with that, I take every leaf and put it on the sunlight and double and triple check this time, But there's nothing that I can see. And usually they're very clean after that. After all that, they're clean. This takes over an hour to do if you're having 10 to 15 people at your table for 2 nights of Pesach, and you have to have, of course, the chaseres or the lettuce for both storms. It's a job if you do it right. But then you've done your job, and you've done it right for something that does have. And some years I haven't found at all. Maybe one. Some years I found even a grasshopper once.
We know that strawberries and blackberries and other fruits have bugs, very tightly.
Right.
Yet we see if you go to Rouse, you go to stores and preserves with good extra on it. How can they get without the bugs to make the jelly?
Right. With a lot of these jellies, it's not an issue because of all we've discussed that the tura is not there anymore. Okay, it could be old.
But it started.
No. Right now, remember now. Now you're not gonna have the intact bug in there.
So you're not gonna have it made.
No, it makes no difference.
But when they made it will be a question of
Yeah, but it's not, because they're not about the
They're not
bug
they're
lechatchila.
cooking it and to make it a third.
Yeah, but they don't intentionally want to the isser. So by the time you have jam and these things, it's not an issue.
Okay.
The issue is where the bug is still intact. Now, what about fish? Lately, the big thing about fish, yes.
But the fish, vegetable leaves and so on.
Right.
I would like the women,
Uh-huh.
not to put too much salt, that this will, some of the bugs will react by going into the vegetable.
It could be with certain ones, not with the leaves. Now with you're right. There's a lot of these big companies have a list of fruits that are commonly infested and ways to deal with it properly. How to clean them, some that they don't advise cleaning them. Here in California, I really believe we don't have as much problem, but still some of them are known to have from time to time. It maybe depends on how much rain we've had, as far as how much bugs. Gush Katif, for example, hopefully we'll get it back soon, was able to develop a type of bug-free leaf or vegetable because it was mostly covered and did not allow for bugs to come in.
I know there was the salad place.
Yeah. Here, local?
Somewhere I didn't witness where they
Yes.
put the medicine.
Sure.
And what was their standard? And
Right.
They said, bug-free. Bags, bring me 3 bags.
Right.
Give me a big thing.
Right.
Bugs full.
Right.
The stuff that had hechsher, whatever.
Yeah, because goyim have different standards. Yeah, we can't. Depending on what the standards are. Depending on what the standards are, they are going to be definitely better than your ordinary, leaf.
The company was upset with you.
Sure. Oh, sure. But I think some companies are better. Yeah, that will depend on the. But I know goyim are not so makbid as we are. So a few bugs got in there. They even tell you, the big companies, that in every product that they make, there's some residues of animal. It could be mice or feces and all kinds of things, dirt that gets involved. What can you do? Our drinking water in the open air has microbes, but they have a lot of filters that eliminate most of the microbes and most of the things. And hopefully, by the time you're drinking the water, in New York they had a problem. It's New York water is a problem. Something about New York. Yeah. But anyway, fish.
So of these yolks with blackberry, raspberry, they have actually no raspberries.
Right. No.
Why
Usually it's not a problem. Yeah. A lot of the time, if you can see the fruit, if it's still intact, then you may be able to check it, but it's very difficult to check. It's very difficult to check it. That's why in many areas we do use chazaka. If you found this, you can't eat it.
So if it has a hechsher, it probably comes from a batch that was
Yeah, because I don't know about the hechsher, because I don't know how far the hechsher goes. Do they give a hechsher also about toloim? Or do they give you a hechsher that this yogurt has no gelatin?
that's all.
No, and any non-kosher ingredients.
I'm
But
talking like JJ.
as far as the bugs, I don't really know that. You have to ask, the companies that give hashgacha, and how do they consider those things that have mixed fruits? Because I know that with certain frozen vegetables, unless it has a very good hashgacha, a lot of mashgichim do not recommend them because they may still have the bug. Because all they did was rinse them.
And you have to be
Right.
careful with
So some do not even recommend the frozen vegetables because of that reason. So those that have a good hashgacha, it could be because they've checked them. Or I have to assume that at times, mashgichim do use the din of chazaka.
Yeah.
At the very least, that's what they go for. It's too much to check. How are you going to check everything? So that kind of a situation, you use chazaka. I think that they're going to use that in conjunction with other
what I was
things.
wondering.
Yeah,
And many of the things we made by somebody else.
right.
You can't.
So anyway, cleansing and checking, there's no doubt, is very important, especially when things are known to have a problem. And there's different ways of doing depending on what it is. Fish, it turns out, is really not a new problem. Animals, fish, have always been known to have sometimes worms in the head, in other parts of the body. Mechaber speaks about it. It's a Beferish Mechaber. It came up recently because somehow it came to their attention that more fish than ever, or certain fish, were being discovered with certain long white worms. There's a certain name for it. There's different kinds of worms that latch themselves or somehow get into the body or are formed or born in the body. That's the question: is where did it come from? Did it come from the outside? Was it ingested by the fish, or did it grow in the? That's what we want to know, because those things that are really part of the fish growing there is not a problem. For the most part, any worm that is between the skin and the fish or within the meat of the fish is usually not a problem. Usually not a problem. The worms that are found in the head, worms that are found in the stomach of the fish are a problem. Possibly it was ingested. It probably very easily came from the outside. But if you see it in the fish, I mean, you should remove it, right? But is it a problem with the whole fish? Not really. So they made a big, there's a big machloket, and everybody wanted to give they wanted to have their say and their opinion. Only the reason why it came up, the reason why there was a suffix is because we really don't know for sure where this worm is coming from. Maybe it's coming from the outside, right? Imagine one fish, a big fish, swallowing a smaller fish, right? And that small fish had a worm. There's a chain in the ocean, and that's how the worms come back, the fish come back. There's a whole balance in this ecology of fish, of survival, of how Hashem made it, of course, that things latch on to other animals, and it's incredible. So there's some doubt about where this worm is coming from. If we know for sure it's from within inside, it's not a problem. Certain bugs that we know develop in cheese, certain bugs that develop in waters that are static, are not usher. Of course, you have to, if you see it, you remove it, but you can drink the water without having to check it.
Filter it.
Yeah. But it may have some little bugs that were created there, that were born there, developed there. That's not the shares that the Torah had in mind to make. Yeah.
You're not saying there's such a thing, ration?
No, not that.
No.
Yeah, that it just cultivates, cultivates in the waters, cultivates in foods, and that we have our own little things that in our bodies too, that eventually come out and attack. But so certain things are not usher. Certain worms, not all worms are created equal. Therefore, not all worms are usher, and especially worms in fish that are found from time to time. If they did not come from the outside and they're found in certain spots, certain areas of the fish, like in the meat, between the skin and the meat, it usually should not be a problem. It's most likely, I think it's most likely, the experts are saying, ingrown. It's not necessarily something that was ingested from the outside. Okay, let's go quickly just a little bit in Siman Kuf Aleph. Din chaticha ruya liskabed. Just spend a few minutes on that. We started talking about items that are not botol b'shishim, and one of them was a birya. The second one is the chaticha ruya liskabed, which means, loosely translated, anything which is worthy of being served to guests. So the Rashba says it's not just regular guests, it's important guests. You can serve anything, right? So ruya liskabed, we're talking about important guests. That's an important idea to remember. Where is this taken from? It's a Sugya in Chulin, it's also a Mishnah, and it's also the Gemara there, that brings down a list of things that are not bottle, and it says Basar b'cholov, and it says Nevelas and dog tame, a fish that is, things that have nothing to do with things that are bottled, that are not bottled b'mash, b'shishim. So the Gemara says, well, what's the problem over here? Is it because it's a davar shebeminyan, which the Gemara already knows, which we'll eventually talk about? Davar shebeminyan, things that are happening because they're counted, right? So the Gemara says, no. These are exceptions for a totally different concept called ruyim leiskabed. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says there are certain things that because of their importance in being served as such, they're not bottled. Afilu be'elef. So their din is like a din of a birya. Chaticha ruya liskabed dino kebirya. The filu be'elef lo betela, that even in the town she will not be bottled. And now the Mechaber says, vafilu im hi asuro behano, even if she's asur behano, this piece, still it will not be bottled. Kivan shim tisbatel hoyso muteres ruya liskabed. If it would be bottled, it would be muteres ruya liskabed. So what is the Mechaber adding in the second part? That even if it's asur behano. The reason why he says even if it's asur behano, well, obviously, what's the chiddush here? He says, okay, im tisbatel, if it will be mizbatel, this thing which is asur behano, it's at least ruya liskabed. That's what he's trying to say. Even if it's asur behano, but because if in the event we would allow it to be bottled, it would be bottled, right? And if it would be bottled, you would eat it. No, not if it's ruya liskabed. But the question is, but why say that about something asur behana? What's the chiddush over here? The chiddush here is that, as the Aruch HaShulchan explains over here, is that even though the Gemara's example is nevelas and treifas, nevel and treifa you might think, what's the chiddush that it's a royal iskabed? You can't be mechabed somebody with a nevel and treifa. So why are you telling me about a nevel and treifa if it's a chaticha royal iskabed? I mean, what's the royal iskabed over here? So that's what he says. That's why it says, no, even if it's not a nevel or treifa, even if it's a davar osur behano, like basar becholov.
But it doesn't include that in the previous.
Doesn't include that, of course.
So you still have the same problem.
Yeah, obviously, but that's what the Mechaber is saying. In other words, don't think just ordinary sur. What?
How do you answer the question you just raised?
No, if you ask me what's the, obviously nevela treifa, I mean, is also to eat. But what is this about nevela treifa being royally skabed?
Right.
How could you take a nevela treifa? I mean, you wouldn't be mechabed the nevela treifa. In other words, it's not something that is to be mechabed. That's the way he says it. In other words, even though that's not something that you could be mechabed somebody with, it's treif. So that's what the mechaber here says, that even if it's not that, even if it's something which is perfectly okay, but it's also behano, like basar becholov, kivan shim tisbatel hoysam muteres ururi leskabed. In other words, I was just trying to explain why does the mechaber here emphasize, even though this is the lashon of the Torah, by the way. Okay, he doesn't just say it himself. What's this asur behana? So asur behana means even if it's things that are not ordinarily treif, like nevelas and treifas, even though something is just has a different problem, it's asur behana for some reason. Even something like that would not be bottle.
For the first time.
Right.
And I was thinking the same question. Why?
Yeah, it's interesting.
The explanation of merit to understand.
Yeah,
I don't understand how you have a better understanding of the asur hana'a by comparing it to nevela and treifa, where nevela and treifa. Now, my thought was, and I was wondering, maybe you can comment on. My thought was that something that asur hana'a.
Right.
So it has a through that is the exact opposite of the. You can't honor someone with something that's us. It's not honorable. You're not showing him respect by trying to feed him something that's not.
Right.
So what is he answering? The mechaber. The mechaber is answering if it would be misbatel. So now it would not be asur b'hana because of the business. When we say it's not misbatel, we're talking about eating, not about hana.
Right.
So if it would be misbatel, then if you served it and would no longer have the blemish of asur b'hana, it would be ra'ui litchabed. It's a nice piece of asur b'hana.
That's the pashut meaning here. But the fact that he entertains her,
and that might explain the treifa and the vela.
Yeah.
If it so happened that the animal had not died a natural death, but had gone through a slaughter process, it would be a nice piece to the chabed.
Right.
So it happens it's an avela, but it didn't die in the proper way.
Right.
So maybe that's what comparison is up there. Like here, but asur b'hana'ah. Think away the blemish of asur b'hana'ah and look at it as pieces that would not be asur b'hana'ah, like basar b'chal. Would it be rawina yitchabed? So also by nevela and treifa. Now, of course, you normally honor a person eating nevela, but think that this animal had not died of natural causes, or through an animal that was slaughtered properly. Would it be a place like rawina yitchabed? And even if it's a nevela, you're not allowed to serve.
Yes. That's pretty much what he says. I mean, yeah. But I wanted to add an additional idea here, and this is also to be found, I think the Shulchan speaks about this, and I thought maybe this would be an interesting chiddush here too. And that is what happens, it's brought in the Poiskim, the following scenario, when you have something which is asur behana getting mixed up with foods that are asur be'achila. Okay, you hear my example? Something which is asur behana, like basar becholov, a piece of basar becholov, that got mixed in with things that are asur be'achila. What do you say? So the halacha they bring down is that it's mutter. It's bottle, not that it's mutter, you can't eat, right? But it's bottle. It's still bottle. Why? In other words, it does not no longer have a din of royulis kabed over here. Well, he never did, but I'm saying you wouldn't necessarily say that because it's royulis kabed, it's not bottle. Why? Because in these situations, when something is not royal achila, the Poiskim explain, it's not royal achila for you, it's royal achila to a goy. For something to be a royal, in other words, you don't apply the din of royal kabed when it's only good for some and not good for others.
Explain the treifa.
Right. In other words, by roile eskabed, in this case, you can't eat it, in this case, but I can give it to a goy to eat. That's if it's not asur behano. If the whole mixture is not asur behano, I'm allowed to give it to a goy to eat. Something that is asur behano means I cannot feed it to a goy, not even to my dog. Right? So that's why I want to know if this would be batal, something which is asur behano, but it's a roile eskabed piece. It got mixed to things which are asur be'achila, so the poskim write that it would be batal, because the din of roilus kabed means it can't be roilus kabed for anyone. I mean, it has to be roilus kabed for everyone. Yeah. Here it's being roilus kabed only for a goy, not for a Jew. He can't eat it. But it doesn't have the din of roilus kabed. Yeah.
That is so. Then how do we ever of bittul by hati chabed is roilit? The whole problem of being the battle of peace when it's the roilit chabed implies
because it would be because anything which is also that is bottle, and you'll be able to eat it, but the only reason you can't eat it but the only reason I can't eat it now is because it's ra'ulit kabed. I can eat the mixture with the ordinary laws of bittul, but because of ra'ulit kabed, then there's a special chumrah that I can't eat it.
But such a piece that we're talking about implies that it's asr, it's all right.
No, of course, yeah, but in the...
But if it's asr, how I said lower the kabet, we just, if I understood it correctly, we said anything that can't be eaten by a Jew
No. Sorry, I understood. Kabet. The scenario that I gave is after the fact. When after the fact, this food item, this mixture, this taaruvos, cannot be eaten by a Jew, but it can be eaten by a goy, right? All right? Then we don't apply the din of royal iskabed over here. Because the din of royal iskabed has to apply whenever it's royal iskabed for everyone. Okay, one second. Here, because of this mixture of foods that cannot be eaten, the guy has something that is asur be'hano, together with things that are asur be'achila. This whole mixture is not royal iskabed or in any way whatsoever for a Jew. It's only royally iskabed for a goy. In other words, the whole mixture is asur. Understand? So because the whole mixture is asur to begin with, so I don't say that it should not be the one that's asur behano should not be bottled because of a din of a royally iskabed. Royally iskabed does not apply here. I can't eat it anyway. This food, not that royally iskabed piece. Okay, the royally iskabed piece I can never eat anyway. It's always treif. This mixture where it fell in, the other food items, I can't eat either. It's like saying, you know what? Basar b'cholov fell into pork. Okay? Imagine, a piece of broiled kabed basar b'cholov fell into a whole bunch of pork. And it's bottle. Why is it bottle? Because it's bottle, it's also behano. But don't we have a din of bittul? Don't we have a din of bittul? Can't we have a din of basar b'cholov that is bottle?
I've missed you.
Yeah.
It's bottle. Is it bottle with respect to the din of achila? Or is it bottle with respect to the din of isur b'hana'ah?
Isur b'hana'ah.
So what you're saying is that if I have something that's asur b'hana'ah, and it's a davar that is leit chabed.
Right.
It becomes mixed things that are
also to eat.
Right. Then, if there's a majority.
Right.
Then the isser
hana'ah
does not affect the whole pot.
Than't you for clarifying it, because that's what we're talking about. Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
That's what's come to exactly.
Because it's still also to eat, right? The whole thing is also to eat here. The basar b'cholav will not be bottled. Basar b'cholav, by the way, it can be bottled by achila. Okay.
If it's not a roilet chabed.
If it's not a roilet chabed. So that's a separate issue. But here we're talking about the issue of hana. Will the roilet iskabed prevent it from being bottled? Right.
But roilet chabed is a din of achil. Or is there such a din of hana as well?
Well, that's the question. That was the question. We say roilet iskabed means it's not bottled afilu be'elef. Does that apply also to the issue of hana'ah? So thank you for further elaborating on that point. Right. Yeah. So I wanted to say, but perhaps this is a little bit connected to what the Mechaber is saying here about afiluhim yisur b'hana, right? Maybe afiluhim yisur b'hana.
That's a good point.
Kiven shim tizbatel hoysam muter suruyel iskabet. Even if something asur is asur b'hana, right? And it's a davar aroyles kabed. What is he saying over here? That it would be.
So it's a chumrah. What he's saying.
It's a chumrah. It would still be aser. Why? Because in case it would be batel, you would be able to eat it. Oh, I would be able to eat it. Royalist kabed is aser. Right?
But it's only asla la'achil.
You in this case, wherever it gets mixed up and it's asur behana, you would be allowed to sell the whole thing to a goy, except for the item that you are not allowed to have hana from. You would have to deduct that, throw that away to the ocean. In other words, whenever we say that it's bottle, in other words, that the whole thing, there's an isur hana here in this mixture, therefore you can't have it, then you would be able to sell it to a goy minus the part that you cannot have hana from.
But to come back to the din of the mechaber here.
Right.
What the mechaber is saying is, don't think that if you have a piece that is la'ulei chabet, that it's asur b'hana'ah,
right.
Don't think that such a piece is exempt from din of afilu be'elef lo titbatel.
Right.
Don't think it's exempt.
Right.
Such a piece that's asur b'hana'ah is still going to be subject to the din of asul be'elef if it's la'ulei chabed.
Right.
And it will be like the din of the bria.
Exactly. And
So
that
don't
why?
Don't think that this leniency applies in this area.
Right. But what I think he's saying is that because if I could eat it, it would be ru'yus kabed.
And so now the question.
So does that make sense? What I said before, that could be those two halachas are tied together. That in the case of where things are asur b'no mixed with things that are asur be'achila, the chiddush over there is
that the isser of hana'ah is misbatel. But here we're talking about eating. So here the isser of achila will remain on it. I mean, if it's asur for benefit.
Yeah, but the issue of hana will also remain. That's the thing.
If it's asur for benefit, you're not allowed to eat it. If it's asur for benefit, eating is one type of benefit.
Right.
There's asur for benefit.
Right.
It includes not being allowed to eat it.
Right.
So the question is, if I have a pot with the mixed in and chaticha, the word chabet that asur hana.
Right.
If I'm allowed to sell it because the isser of hana was misbatel.
Right.
So maybe I'm also allowed to eat it because the isser of hana was misbatel, including the isser to eat it?
Yes.
So he's saying, lagabe, to sell it, like you said, that you're allowed to, but to eat it you still can't.
You still can, sure. Yeah. So anyway, real quickly, the mekor of this halacha is in the Gemara, if you want to see it. What's the reason for it? The chatchicha ru'yus kabed, even though the Gemara discusses it, what's the svar behind it? So you have a toises and you have a rosh that hold that it's similar to a davar shebeminyan. They hold that a chaticha ru'yus kabed is pretty much on par with the davar shebeminyan. That's the toises and the rosh. The Rashba and the Ran hold that it's only because it's a special concept of chashivas, of importance, of ru'yus kabed, and it has nothing to do with davar shebeminyan. In other words, even if it's something which is not darkoli monois, something which is not going to be counted, still it has its own chashivas. What are the conditions for a chaticha ru'yus kabed that it should be a chaticha ru'yus kabed? This is important. The isser has to be machmas atzmoi, not an isser balua. We know what an isser balua is by now.
Right.
Something that it became asur because except for basar b'chalav, that's not isser balua. Right. That's the real isser is basar b'chalav. So any time a ru'yus kabed has to be a real treifa piece of meat. Without Hashem, next week we'll talk about what happens with a whole full chicken. Is that called a ru'yus kabed? Does it make a difference if it has its feathers on or not? That's a very interesting machlokes there. Yeah, with an entire animal. If that's called a ru'yus kabed, okay. Because who would eat a whole chicken? But anyway. So that we'll talk about. Yeah, that we'll talk about. So the first condition has to be isur machmas atzma, not isur balua. As the Rashba points out, Taz explains that the reason why isur balua doesn't work is because the balua is not ru'yus kabed. It's very simple. It has to be that the isur itself is ru'yus kabed. And I think the Russian tour pretty much hold the same thing. And the Basar explains that this does not apply to basar b'chalav. So that's basically the conditions. The Ramah here says that filo eino asur rak midirabanan and batela, even if it's not also only midirabanan. So we already have a Ramah here that tells us that by isur in the Rabbanan is still not batal. By Biria, by the way, we never explained. Does Biria apply to isur the Rabbanan? You don't really have a situation where Biria the Rabbanan, do you? So There actually could be, but they're not real derabbanans. But anyway, here you can have a situation where a davar, something is also midrabbanan, is, do we say chaticha ruya leskabed? So the Ramah says yes. V'imu sofek im ruya leskabed or lo azlina lekulo afilu yasura doraisa. Even if we're talking about an isur doraisa, if we have a suffix, if this is a chaticha ruya leskabed or not, you go to kula like by Biria, because the whole thing, the whole shir is a derabbanah, so it's a suffix derabbanah lekula. So the Aruch HaShulchan has a very good question in the Ramah. So the Ramah is going along with the Mechaber, that here we're talking about Chaticha Ruya Leskabed. What does the Ramah need this? The Ramah is the one that holds later on that there's an inyan of called Davar Shebeminyan. That is not bottle. What does he need this concept of Ruya Leskabed? The Mechaber is very specific where Davar Shebeminyan applies, just to a few items. But the Ramah says Davar Shebeminyan applies to quite a few things. So what do you to him? What do you need a davar royal iskabed for? Right? If he holds that it's more like a davar shebeminyan. Davar shebeminyan lo bottom. So maybe this is a form of maybe this is a davar shebeminyan. So he explains the Aruch HaShulchan, but davar shebeminyan it's only davar shedarko lehimonois that is usually counted. Something that is not usually counted, even though you may occasionally, sometimes count it, that's not called a davar shebimini. So that's why you still need davar royal iskabed, chaticha royal iskabed, because what the Ramah means only davar shedarkoi. When he calls it davar shebimini, he emphasizes davar shedarko limonoi. The derech is to count, but something which is not the derech, that once in a while you can count it because it's important, that's not called a davar shebimini, and you need a separate isur or concept called chaticha royal iskabed. Yeah. Okay, so we said the Taz, everybody pretty much agrees that this didn't apply to an Isur D'Rabbanan too. What about a piece that was not salted? You can't have it if it wasn't salted. You have blood in there. But guess what? That blood is an Isur Balua. So as far as Chaticha Ruya Leskabed by a piece that was not salted, it wouldn't be an issue. Right?
Because it's not the Isur that's a piece of meat that contains. So therefore,
exactly.
The Isser is not.
It's a davar balua. It's not the real Isser. What I want to do next week already, because the hour is getting late, is a very, very fascinating machloikis by Dover Amayimid. Dover Amayimid in itself, as you know, is one of those things that is not bottled so quick, because it makes the whole cheese. And the Dover Amayimid, depending on what it's made, can pose all kinds of problems. Is it made from the keva of the nevela? Could be an issue of basar b'chalav. Or it could be made from enzymes, all kinds of things that are artificial. As you know, with cheeses, we're machmir, that cheeses are going not to eat, even if they were made, the coagulation, through artificial process. From going, we're machmir. So if a davar amamid, does the davar amamid make cheese into a chaticha ruya leskabed or not? Yeah. That's going to be that's a big question, and it's a problem sometimes. What if they made it from some milk that's not kosher? If you remember Basar b'chalav, you cannot really make cheese from a behemoth meya, but you can make cheese from cows that are treif. They happen to be treif.
No, yet.
You wouldn't.
You
right.
Might know.
Right.
What if you know for sure?
It's a problem. Yeah.
Then can you still make normal?
No, it's a problem. So anyway, so this is something that we will discuss next week. It's Hashem, because of the chashivas of Dover Amami. Does it have the ability to make this piece also, as a result of that it's a chaticha ruya leskabed. In other words, that then, of course, what would you say? It's never bottle. But the question is not so much about the maimed, the question is about the cheese. Okay? Cheese can be a chaticha ruya leskabed. So, and maimed, of course, does have that ability. So we will see if and how it applies. It's a machlokas a place. We'll cover that next week.